The judge for ladder 3 was Paul Bryan, who is a fellow of the PSNZ. He's also a member of the Judge Accreditation Panel, and this year took up his role on the Honour Board, so he is more than qualified to assess images. In fact, he had returned from the Honours Board assessment just before starting our process. Sundown by Marianne Chilcott. I think the clouds arrived at just the right moment to become really supportive in this very pleasant sundown image. The composition is appealing, and the eye tends to move from the group of 3 people in the foreground to the surface on the right, and then back across the image and up to the sunset. Whilst possibly it is an illusion, but I do feel as if the image is not quite straight. I want to lift the right-hand edge a bit. This could be achieved in post-production, and you may wish to try it and see if it does make a difference. The change of tones from cool blue to warm orange works well, and this received a merit. Last Dance by Chris Crawford. While this image reminds me of fireflies dashing across at a fast speed, I feel the subject matter is less of a living thing and more of a man-made object. Of course, I could be very wrong. However, as the title is not helpful in this instance, I have decided to judge this as an open image. It is rather abstract in nature, and I feel that the light patterns have been made against a dark backdrop. I found that my eyes circle endlessly around the image as there was no obvious focal point. The image has a sense of being almost two-dimensional, which is most likely caused by the monochromatic effect. I found the storytelling to be a little weak. If this is a microscopic image of some living organism, I apologize. And that is accepted but changed to an open image. Well Protected by Chris Crawford. The image appears to be a web or cocoon, which is presumably a nest to protect the creature living therein. I should have liked a little more information so that I could better understand the habitat we see. The lighting seems a little harsh and contrasty, which may be due to the time of day that the image was taken. The large dark hole in the bottom right seems as if it might be an entrance. I suggest raising the shadows here to provide the viewer with more information about this feature. Commended. Life on Dead Wood by Marianne Chilcott. An excellent title which suits the set subject and helps tell the story. I find the composition to be quite strong, and this is helped by the juxtapositioning of the incoming birds who are being watched by those perched on the tree trunk. The author might like to consider removing the seagull at the bottom of the tree, as it does not add to the story, but has the effect of pulling the viewer's eye away from the main event. The tree's roots and trunk provide additional detail. I would consider lifting the shadows under the right-hand stump. The vignetting being white is perhaps not required in this instance. Merit. Helen by Cheryl Gallagher. I have little doubt that Helen is living, and I suspect she might not like to be referred to as a thing. I have therefore decided to move the image into the open category and deal with it as a portrait. You have really captured the character of this person within the frame. I feel that Helen is an outgoing kind of person who will most likely give as much as she gets. A life and soul of the party type of person. There is a good interaction with the photographer, and I believe the blink of the left eye is part of her charisma. The hair is windswept, and this suits the pose and the situation. The background is soft and provides sufficient detail to say something about the location. The only suggestion I would offer would be to consider using a little on-camera fill flash if possible. By doing so, you may have been able to make the image a little less flat. Well done. Honours. New Zealand Fur Seal by Cheryl Gallagher. I can almost feel waves lapping at the bottom of the rocks. The fur seal has a very regal expression and seems inquisitive about the photographer. This interaction adds to the storytelling. The composition is a little central, and I feel you could consider recropping from the left and bottom edges. Detail in the fur has been well handled, although I feel the rear fin is a tad sharper than the face. Merit. Flock, Where Are You? By Graham Bond. This little chap really does look lonely. He is brightly coloured and appears to be sharp, yet lacking in detail. By contrast, the branch in front of him has retained a more realistic rendition of the texture. The background is pleasant and unobtrusive. Accepted. The Roar 2020 by Graham Bond. I can definitely hear the bellowing roar coming from this impressive beast. The elegant stance has been well caught. Exposure of the main subject is fine, with many details to consider. I have a number of small suggestions the author may wish to consider. Because this is not a nature set subject, it would be within the rules for you to remove the dark vertical twig on the left, which runs through the tips of the antlers. I find that to be a little distracting. The out of focus area on the right is most likely caused by differential focus. There is not much that can be done, but you may wish to try to lighten the area slightly to lessen its impact. Lastly, just check your file to see if this image or the next one have the rest of the hoof in it. Being cut by the frame is not the best look. Well done for getting the capture. Accepted. Cactus by David Coxon. I enjoyed the very bright colours of this cactus flower and the trumpeting shape as it hangs from its parent plant. I feel the composition is a little constrained and suggests that moving out a little might present the viewer with more interest. The white patches in the background seem to be competing with the flower. At the taking stage, it would be worth considering how the background will look. If necessary, place a cloth or other material behind the subject to remove distracting highlights. Accepted. Symbiosis by David Coxon. As I opened this image, I could almost smell the scent of pine needles and wet bark. The side lighting has enriched the colour in the bark, and this has improved the viewer experience. Generally, an odd number of main elements work better than an even number. It's something to do with how the mind interprets balance. In this instance, the only suggestion I would make to counter this stance would be to remove the slither of black that runs down the right hand edge of the frame. Accepted. In for a Landing by Paul Whittam. There is a certain joy which emanates from seeing these little fellas in the garden. The shutter speed and exposure have combined to produce a good capture of the incoming bird approaching the feeding station. The human element does not concern me, as the set subject is about living things and not nature per se. The feeding station is clearly the intended destination for this chap. Good storytelling. Honours. The Look of Old Age by Paul Whittam. The author has captured a rather amusing and character pose within this image. It almost seems as if the monkey wants to engage in a gossipy kind of conversation. He looks very natural, and the eye contact with the photographer really makes for a pleasing image. The monochrome treatment is effective in this instance. Honours. Ebony and Ivory by Phil Binge. I get quite an odd sensation whilst viewing this image because something doesn't seem quite as natural as it should be. I suspect this might be a compilation of some sort. The blue background is very powerful, but does not seem to fit together with the other tones in the image. Compositionally, I feel that a small crop from the left and an even smaller crop from the right would retain the viewer's interest on the two birds. The eyes are sharp and you have retained highlights in the white plumage. Accepted. The Family by Phil Binge. I enjoyed this image. The interaction between parents and chick is well caught and contains a good story. I find the colour palette is a little strong and suggest that you might consider reducing either the vibrance or saturation a fraction in post-production. Merit. Polar Bear Cubs by Susan Cain. There is something quite appealing about this image. The bear cubs seem spellbound and interested in the photographer. This has led to a well-captured interaction. Whilst we are looking at nature in a moment of awe, I suspect they might be thinking lunch. I find the white sky at the top of the image a little distracting and suggest you consider removing it. Also, a very small crop from the right-hand side would, in my opinion, add the composition a fraction. Merit. Polar Bear at Play by Susan Cain. Wow. I feel as if I'm right there standing next to the author. The action is great, the composition and exposure spot on, a delightful moment in time. Honours. Brown Bear by Greg Kane. I enjoy the natural stance adopted by the brown bear as he leaves the river. You can see that his eyes are alert and there is a twitch in his nose as he sniffs the air for the possibility of food. If you look at the claws of the front feet, they are perfectly sharp. Sadly, focus has dropped off, or the bear moves slightly, as the eyes are quite soft. The exposure and composition work well. Merit. Cub and Salmon by Greg Kane. What a happy moment for this little cub. There is a certain stride in his walk which tells you that he's in for a great meal. The action has been well seen. I feel the chosen shutter speed might have been a fraction slow for these circumstances. Although the water seems to be frozen in time, a close look at the eye of the bear and the salmon reveals a little blurring. I would invite the author to consider lifting the shadow around the eye in post-production. Also, I feel it would be a good idea to extend the right-hand edge to provide a little more space for the bear to run into. The warm colour palette is most pleasing. Merit. Lunch by Chris Parkin. Another great moment caught on camera. I am assuming the owl is consuming a rodent of some description, as only the tail remains in view. He does look rather satisfied with his meal. The image is a little soft, and I feel that a greater depth of field would have provided the desired sharpness. Accepted. Tane Mahuta by Chris Parkin. The sheer size of this tree, coupled with its location, presents a difficult challenge for the photographer. The tree is rather centred within the frame. However, I'm not sure if the author could have done much about that from their vantage point. The image is well exposed, but again rather soft and lacks sharpness throughout the trunk. Accepted. Caribou by Rob Vanderpool. The composition really draws the viewer straight towards the bird's eye. This is partly due to the colour, but the sharpness and the details of the plumage provide pleasing information. I do find the background on the right-hand side to be very distracting. Possibly this could have been avoided by changing the viewpoint or using a shorter length lens so that more of the bird was included. Alternatively, you might try a tight crop down to the eye, beak, and neck feathers. The detail here is very strong and may benefit from such a composition. Commended. Towel by Rob Vanderpool. A very colourful capture of the waxeye carrying a meal. I feel the colours are a little saturated, and in this instance there is evidence of some over-sharpening in post-production. The halo or black line along the top edge of the bird tends to support this position. I like the inclusion of the bird feeder, which helps to tell the story of these lovely garden birds. Commended.